But an interesting conversation that I was having with you right before the show, where you spoke about how the Kargil War is actually a story of these two nations, of Pakistan and India. How about you let the viewers inside your brain? What are you feeling today, 24th Kargil Vijay Diwas, and what did you mean by that, the story of two nations?
So, Kabir, firstly, thank you for having me here. It's a poignant day today as we remember all the 500 odd Indian soldiers who laid down their lives to guard our frontiers. And it's also interesting that next July we're going to observe a quarter century since the Kargil War. And what I was telling you earlier, Kabir, is that essentially it's interesting to see the trajectory of India and Pakistan, right, since the Kargil War. Now, Kargil was in 1999. It was 8 years since India's economic reforms had kicked off. And today we're looking at a country that's firmly on the path to be the third largest economy in the world by the end of this decade. And on the other hand, you have a country which is an economic basket case that relies on IMF doles, that relies on handouts from its friends in the Middle East. So essentially, if you look at it, I mean, I'd like to see it as something beyond just the war. It's a story of two nations and the choices that they've made. India chose to be an economic powerhouse. Security is one of its concerns, but not its only concern. Pakistan is a security state where the armed forces have captured the country. They're holding it hostage for over half a century. And all the priorities that it dictates are security priorities, right? It's playing the game of geopolitics, but not geoeconomics. The geoeconomics is clearly where the future is. And today, as we are talking about the Kargil Vijay Diwas, we are also keeping an eye out in orbit for Chandrayaan, right? Chandrayaan 3. When is it going to deorbit from Earth and head towards the moon? That's another spectacular achievement. That also tells you the kind of investments that we've made in science and technology to benefit our people, right? At the end of the day, it's all about the people of the nation, right? All of this serves the people, whether it's armed forces, whether it's the scientific technological community. It's all about benefiting the people. So the question that Pakistan must really ask itself is, what are the priorities that it laid down for itself over half a century back? Was it nuclear bombs, or is it none? You know, I'm looking at the food prices inside Pakistan. So clearly, 25 years later, we're entering the 25th year of the Kargil War, the last war that we fought. Hopefully, it's going to be the last war that we ever fight with Pakistan. But look at the choices that we've made. And you're looking at a country, like I said earlier, which has come down to $4 billion in foreign exchange reserves, just enough for about 2 weeks of imports. So essentially, this war is one of the milestones in a series of bad decisions, series of bad choices made by the powers that be inside Pakistan.
Wow, that's very eloquently put. I mean, for somebody who was born in 1995, had no sense of what's happening under the sun in 1999, and only hearing stories from my grandmother about how the walls were painted black, near the Punjab border where they were. I mean, those kind of stories, they really grip you. They do take you back in time. And I mean, you must have really lived and breathed through all of those situations. We also have Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia, former DG Military Operations, joining us on the broadcast here. Lieutenant General, I'm going to take the next question to you. You know, even as Sandeep here in the studio is talking about how, this is a story about two countries where we have focused on geoeconomics, not just geopolitics. 24 years down the line, I mean, where do we stand today in terms of our military prowess? What was it back then in terms of military strategy? All of those aspects and factors. Have we made the right strides and steps in these last 24 years?
Absolutely. I think today we are a responsible, resilient country, nation. We are a regional power. We are a global leader. And that's where we are. And look at the quarter century where we were in 99 and where we are today. In 99, we had to go and assault the Kargil heights because we did not cross the line of control. And that was because of both external pressures, basically, and mainly because Pakistan, under the nuclear overhang, thought that they can get away with anything. But today, if you look at Pakistan, look at India, we're poles apart, absolutely. There's no comparison now. We have de-hyphenated Pakistan. We are a growing power today. We are the world is looking at us for growth. We are looking at the well-being of 1.4 billion people. And that's what our aim is. unlike Pakistan, which keeps on seeking parity with India and is seeking military parity with India, because in Pakistan, it's the Pakistani army which drives the India policy, rather all policy, including the economic policy. So look where they are today. It's a rightly said, it's a basket case today. But I hope not, because we don't want our neighbors to be imploding. And we are now far ahead. And fortunately, dehyphenated, like I said, from Pakistan, India, Pakistan, Pakistan, India, and that's what hyphenation they seek. They seek parity, and we seek the well-being of people. We seek a role in the global world order, which we have got. And we are an economic power today. We are a military power today, and we are also a global power. Let's face facts out there. We are India today.
One of those stories, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this here, but News 9 Plus is attempting a documentary on the same, and Sepoy Satpal Malik, who was there on the front lines, an anecdote, and very interesting anecdote, is going to be part of that documentary.
Absolutely, Kabir.
That Sher Khan, aap uske baare mein bata rahe the, and the citation in his pocket. What an interesting and fascinating story.
You know, Kabir, the story that we are attempting, which we'll be dropping today on the platform on Vijay Diwas, is something that we should really be proud of. I mean, no one's proud of fighting wars and battles, right? This Kargil war was imposed on us. And how the Indian Army handled it is an example of how we are as a nation and how we are as an army, and the reason why soldiers like General Vinod Bhatia should be saluted for the kind of exemplary conduct in crisis, in conflict. And the story of Sepoy Satpal Singh is exemplary, because here was a soldier who was asked to do his duty, to just kill the enemy. He saw this officer fighting him in Kargil. He engaged in hand-to-hand combat. He killed him, and they later discovered that this was Captain Karnal Sher of the 12th Northern Light Infantry.
The Captain Karnal Sher.
The Captain Karnal Sher Singh Khan. And after that, they actually sat down and said, listen, he was our enemy, we killed him, we captured the post, but his valor was exemplary. And Brigadier MPS Bajwa actually sat down and wrote a citation saying that he's displayed exemplary gallantry in the way he fought against
the enemy. For the
enemy. And he wrote that note and he put it in Captain Karnal Sher's body, and that body was sent back to Pakistan through the Atari border. And after that, Pakistan awarded him the Nishan-e-Haidar, which is their equivalent of the Paramveer Chakra.
Wow.
It's almost unimaginable. There are many countries in the world which would absolutely not do this kind of thing, but that's the way the Indian Army is. This is the ethos of the Indian Army. This is what we stand for. The kind of conduct, whether in war or in peace, right? And this comes a few weeks after the kind of savage, barbaric way with which they treated Captain Saurav Kalia and his patrol, who the Northern Light Infantry, kidnapped and killed and brutally tortured and then killed.
This is how we pay that.
This is how we treat our enemy war wounded, their dead, and the enemy soldiers that we captured. So it's actually, Kargil is also not just a story of two nations, Kabir. It's also a story of two armies, how they approach conduct, how they approach warfare, their conduct in warfare, in conflict.
Absolutely. I mean, stories about humanity as well. And these stories are going to outlive all of us. And I'm so glad that, that particular story of, Sepoy Satpal Malik from his own mouth is going to be part of the documentary. It's going to drop today. News 9 Plus is the application. I promise this is not a market plugin. Do download it. Incisive analysis, cutting edge documentaries in the time that you have. I mean, I've certainly downloaded it. Everybody at my home adores the documentaries over there, on there. But Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia, let's also push you down the memory lane. Sir, tell us about what was it like. Back in the day in Kargil. What was your role essentially? What was your day-to-day duty look like?
Unfortunately, not part of the war, though I was there in the month of July. 26th July, I was there in Dras. And having served out there, I was sent to Army headquarters to study the battles and study how the units performed and the Valor. I think Kargil was a turning point in the history of the Indian Armed Forces and in Indian Army in particular. For quite a few things. We had got into our mind at that time, there was a sort of a feeling that the young officers are not up to it, and Kargil changed all that. Our young officers, our young leaders, basically, whether it is officers, JCOs, even NCOs, they fought and they fought valiantly. For Kargil, heights are an average of 4,800 meters plus, that is about 16,500 feet, 70,000 feet. And you take 2 steps up, you come 1 step back. And nowhere in the world, I say that again, have any armies fought and won and recaptured territories, beating the enemy at those heights. Because if someone sitting on top of the heights like Tiger Hill or Darling can just roll down the stones and they come down, it's really near impossible to climb up. And that is the valor of our soldiers, our leaders. I must also, add to what Sandeep and what you were saying. I think media played a very major role in motivating, and media is a force multiplier. For the first time, we saw the media as a motivator also. The men were so motivated by seeing the images of the Indian Army performing the most hazardous and difficult tasks with ease. And that is what it is all about. And we must also, all those who made the Supreme sector, hats off to them, their families. We owe them, homage to them, gratitude to them, the injured, and the leaders. I think one of the major leaders was General Mohinder Puri, as the General Officer Commanding, who was moved from the Kashmir Valley into Battle State in the month of May, and there are many others like him. There are many stories among the men. Swarup Kali, of course, is a tale which we can never forgive our army for. That the armies don't do that. And look at the difference between the two armies. That is how I think Indian Army behaves. Indian Army fights. Indian Army lives. It's a value system. It's a beliefs. And the Naam Namak Nishan was the driving force. The unit is a driving force. The men were so proud of their achievements, and they were, that pride was so. It was a feeling which I still remember 25 years down the line, 24 years down the line. That feeling of pride in them, the izzat and the respect which they got. A soldier needs very little. He needs a little bit of respect and regard, and that is what the nation gave them, the people gave them, and the feedback they got from the families home, that they're very proud of what they're doing. And for them, actually, success was not really, a probability, and failure not an option. And they went and attacked heights like Tololing and Tiger Hill, and all those heights which are there, 4815, 4715. These are heights actually which the enemy was occupying, and they're prepared, but they did not factor in the courage and the weight of the Indian soldiers.
I mean, very rightly said. And the chests of these family members, oozing with pride. Let's play out those reactions for Lieutenant General and Sandeep, and for the viewers as well. Vishal Batra, Vikram Batra's father, various residences of these soldiers that the brave hearts that we lost in Kargil. We've got visuals, reactions coming in from their households. Take a look.
युवा शहीद जिन्होंने कारगिल विजय के लिए अपनी कुर्बानी दी है, उनके प्रति हमारी श्रद्धा और उनके प्रति हमारा सम्मान ये जाहिर होता है। और ये प्रत्येक भारतीय का कर्तव्य बनता है कि आज के दिन हम इस दिवस को मनाएं और अपने हमारे जो शहीद हैं कारगिल के, उनको श्रद्धांजलि दें।
I believe what he mentioned was absolutely true, that we should remember the valor and the sacrifice of each of the young bravado who's laid down their life. And I think I was, definitely impressed, the way he talked about the Indian Army per se, that what Indian Army stands today. And if need be, ever there for crossing the LOC, the India would not shy away from that. And I think that's a big statement, primarily looking at the sacrifice what these young guys did 24 years back, when we were not even supposed to even cross the LOC or near to the LOC, right? So I think it's a great tribute and remembrance to all these young valiant soldiers who laid down their life.
कारगिल युद्ध में अपना बलिदान दिया है, उनको मैं नमन करूंगा। और साथ में जो हमारे सैनिक भाई हैं, जो हमारे बॉर्डर्स के ऊपर बैठे हमारी दिन रात रक्षा करते हैं, उनको मैं सादर प्रणाम करूंगा और आशीर्वाद दूंगा।
It's so great to see that, sort of like an altar has been made inside these homes, and the uniforms are being preserved. It's just beautiful to see. Sandeep, you spoke about how the Kargil War can be looked at, in 3 phases. There's the phase of deception, then comes the fog of the war, and it really talks about who we are as people and how, our thought process as well. Can you break down those layers for the viewers?
Sure. So Kabir, the planning for the Kargil War actually predates the Kargil War itself, decades ago in fact. This plan was hatched somewhere in the mid-80s when Pakistan had already got its nuclear weapons. So somewhere around 1985, when the Pakistan army was a little more confident against India, it hatched a plan.
14 years before 1999.
That's correct, yeah. 1985 is when they finalized this plan called Koh Pema, which means Op KP, the Call of the Mountains. And they said that this is a plan for us to go across the line of control during the winter and capture Indian posts, winter vacated posts. And this plan, for obvious reasons, was never implemented because it was far too dangerous, right? In 1990, they tried it, and they were met with a ferocious Indian response immediately, and so that kind of put them off balance. 1998, cut to 98, October, you have this dashing Commando General, Pervez Musharraf, who takes over. And believes he's God's gift to Pakistan, and he has to do something to prove the fact that he is the greatest army chief ever. And how does he do that? By capturing parts of Indian Kashmir. And he implemented Op KP. October is when they began infiltrating battalions of the Northern Light Infantry across the line of control. They were all in place by about January or February. There were a total of about 5 battalions, 4 of the Northern Light Infantry and 1 of the Sindh Regiment. And they were basically tasked with capturing these winter vacated posts, over 100 of them, and creating their own posts. So that was the covert phase, when for several months they actually lay there quietly in the posts. It was a top secret operation, and in fact it combined so many different aspects of military planning. Like
Indian Army was completely oblivious.
It was because there was an agreement of sorts that winter vacated posts would not be kind of captured.
Right.
They would, the Indian Army would come down from the winter vacated posts and then reoccupy those posts in summer. So there was also an agreement that this is where the line of control extended. This was declared in the Simla Accord of 1972. So I think in good faith, the Indian Army believed that Pakistan would not transgress, especially on these areas, right?
And especially in the winters.
And especially in the winters. Possibly a big mistake given the fact that how they reacted with Siachen, and we had to perforce go and occupy Siachen in 1984, launch Op Meghdut because of the fact that they had started advancing towards the glacier. So in the first phase, you can look at from October of 98 to about early 1999, May. Come the first week of May is when the shepherds spot these intruders on the heights of Kargil, and they start reporting it. And then the army gets suspicious that, look, there could be some unusual activity here, and that's when the first patrols go out there to investigate. Captain Saurav Kalias is one of the first patrols that does that. They're captured, they're murdered in cold blood, and that's when we realize that there's something afoot. More patrols start going out, the army engages it, and in this phase, from May onwards, is the fog of war phase. What I call the fog of war phase between May and early June is when we are not very clear of the identity of the people who are occupying the heights. And let's remember that there's a tremendous IW Ops campaign from the Pakistani side conveying the fact that the heights at Kargil have been occupied, but it's occupied by the Mujahideen. Right? It's occupied by the so-called Kashmiri freedom fighters, by Afghan Mujahideen and all of that. And we kind of bought that line for a while until June, when we first, in our first early successes in Kargil, we kind of captured a lot of these bunkers, and we found documents that proved beyond any reasonable doubt that we were up against the Pakistan military. So from June to July, end of July, Kargil Vijay Diwas is when we were in full-scale operations against the Pakistan army. So these are essentially the 3 phases of the Kargil war. The first was, of course, the covert war from their side. The second, of, like I said, that 1-month fog of war thing. We are not clear of the identity of the perpetrators. And the third is when we know who we are up against. And of course, there is that very famous intercept, that RAW had intercepted this conversation between Pervez Musharraf and one of his generals, right? Where he was talking, he was bragging about the success of the Pakistan military. And when it became very clear by then that we were engaged against the Pakistan army.